All right, so I see that we've got one person who's joined us so far. I'm going to give this one more minute to see if we get any additional folks who join, and then we will kick off at like 10:01. All right, so I say that we start.
Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this relatively gray day in May for a final parent discussion that is provided by Sasko River Center monthly through the academic year, generally from August through May. This is our last parenting webinar this academic year, and it is called Embracing Mayhem, which in fact may be one of the reasons why some folks who are signed up have not been able to jump onto the Zoom yet. The goal of this is, and the subtitle, the parenthetical title, is how to use this end of school year stress as a springboard into conversations, into summer planning, into planning for next year, into any kind of reflection and consideration for how this information can be used instead of just letting it be great success or great disappointment, or even just to come and go and vanish as summer break takes over, that type of thing. My name is David Kucher, and I work at Sasko River Center as a learning coach. I've been with Sasko River Center since, yikes, 2010, and have always worked there in conjunction with being somewhere else. So most of my world has been in schools. Prior to schools, I was working in corporate America, but then I worked at New Canaan Country School as the director of learning resources for about 7 years. And then I moved to Greenwich Country Day School, where I did the same job, but for upper class. So New Canaan Country School, I was seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. Greenwich Country Day School, I was sixth grade straight up through 12th grade. So I've got a long history of working with students and families around A, mayhem, but B, how you're using school, the participation in school, the skills that are challenged in school, the curriculum that is learned in school, how you're using all of that material with your child to really measure growth, and then to scaffold whatever challenges are out there, and to celebrate and support and continue to use the successes that are out there. Melanie?
Okay. Thank you, David. So hi there, I'm Melanie Brown. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and director at Sasko River Center. I've been working as a therapist and researcher for the past 20 years, helping young people and their parents with a wide range of mental health issues, including anxiety, OCD, and eating disorders. As a parent, I can also relate to the pressures and stress of raising children in an increasingly complex world.
So one of the things that I've noticed and that I'm interested in is the way that storytelling has changed. And that may not seem to have anything at all to do with today, but if you're a television watcher, if you're a book reader, if you are a movie goer, you'll notice that a lot of storytelling has started with the crisis. And so whether you're watching White Lotus or you're watching Alias, you'll often see that, like, the gunshot goes off at the beginning, and then the whole rest of the show is building up to how do we find out who actually shot the gun. So we thought we would do the same thing here. We would start with the crisis. So Melanie, I'll let you speak first.
Okay, thanks, David. So to paint a picture of the crisis that we're facing with our youth, David and I wanted to share some statistics with you. As parents, most of us seek to give our children the best lives possible, protecting and nurturing them to set them up for success as adults. Sending children to the best schools and supporting their academic achievement is one of the main ways that parents seek to raise successful adults. It makes sense, right? Well, let's look at some research on that. According to a large-scale 2018 research study conducted by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the top environmental conditions negatively impacting adolescent health, both mental and physical, are poverty, that makes sense, trauma, also makes sense, discrimination, also makes sense, and excessive pressure to excel. That might be a surprising one to you on this list, that it's a risk factor and it's a similar negative predictor to mental and physical health in adulthood as poverty, trauma, and discrimination. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation found that, quote, family and or school environment characterized by extreme pressure to succeed, occurring especially affluent communities, can affect youth in significant deleterious ways, including causing high levels of stress and anxiety or alcohol and drug use and dependence.
On my end, the crisis that I wanted to put out there involves college. So, according to the Education Data Initiative, which is a US organization that exclusively focuses on data around education, most specifically um, high school graduation rates and college acceptance rates and the college graduation rates. Approximately 62% of high school graduates immediately enroll into college. So that is around 19.1 million students a year leave their senior year of high school and go into college. 19.1 million students. 1 in 5 of those students drop out in their first year, either first semester or second semester of college. So that means that around 4 million students are starting school and for a whole host of reasons, not able to stay in school. That is a crisis. What is happening that is making that take place where 1 in 5 freshmen don't make it? So again, a really strange thing for us to do today, but we're going to put our call to action at the very, very beginning. We're basically saying at the very beginning of this, here's the way that we solve these problems. Melanie, do you want to speak to it?
Sure. Presenting that crisis, we actually think we could be done right here for the day to bring it into light. This is truly, truly the point of what we want to say. And the three big takeaways for our presentation today are: one, focus and reflect on the process, not the outcome. Two, the process is learning, communicating, and nurturing your relationship with your child, not the outcome. And three, be a role model in being perfectly imperfect as a parent and a person.
So now that we've set up our basically our end result, here's the crisis. Here are the opportunities that we're promoting as ways to hit the crisis and work with the crisis. Here's the topic and agenda for what we have going on today. It's the only slide where we are going to read to you, so I apologize ahead of time. Here's what we're looking at today: acknowledge and reframe end of school year stress. So instead of just letting it happen, looking at it as an opportunity so that you can converse about it, you can identify what can be done with it from a learning perspective or from a psychosocial perspective. Creating some kind of a judgment-free zone for a feedback loop. Very hard to do, but some way of communicating about those successes, those challenges, without there being this huge judgment. Why did you not do well on the math final exam? Well, I didn't study. Okay, cool. I'm glad we know that. How can we put something in place in the future for that? Implementing a summer plan, start of next school year plan, or some way of focusing on the process. From a mental health perspective, looking to identify how to keep achievement in perspective. It's great to get a fantastic score on the final exam, but if you don't, that can be okay. How do you reframe that so that it's a learning process? It's a growth process. managing stress, worry, and perfectionism, and showing unconditional love and support. For anyone who is on the Zoom, is there anything that you expected that is not in the agenda? Freely unmute yourself and say whatever's on your mind. Fantastic. Then we are going to move forward. Very quickly, just some rules and logistics. This is being recorded. At the end of this, you will receive a link to the recording that we will host on our YouTube channel at Sasko River Center. You'll also receive this exact slide deck. The Google slide deck is a PDF. So for those of you who are diligent note takers, you will get this. It will show up, and hopefully you can just sit back and enjoy. If in fact you do have a question as we're going along, please put the question into the Q&A link that you see on the Zoom. We will address your questions. We've actually budgeted time at the end to address questions. So freely add all of the questions as you see them. At the very moment, Melanie and I are going to divide and conquer, as one might say. I speak far more from the learning perspective because that is my education, that's my history, that's my experience. And so I'm going to speak for a few slides right now, and then we're going to shift gears after a pause, and Melanie is going to speak about the psychosocial sides of all of mayhem and what we can do with that. I'm going to start all the way with, what's the point of going to school? So obviously, we just have a culture and a society where we say, great, you are 5. It's time for you to start going to school. And from 5 until you are maybe 8 or so, you're exposed to curriculum, but you're underneath this huge bell curve. So in 2nd grade, if you can respond to a prompt of, okay, everybody go to your cubby and grab your independent reading book and come back over here and join us. And one student goes and grabs the book and is sitting down, but another student stands up and walks to the cubby and says, what are we getting? Why do I have to do that? And another student is still sitting in his seat waiting for, needs a second prompt. Everybody falls under that bell curve. Fine. And we don't really worry about that until the same thing happens in 8th grade. Okay, everybody, put everything in your backpack, take out a pencil, and I'm going to pass out the paper for the quiz. And you've got a lot of kids who are totally prepared. You've got some kids who have no pencil. You've got some kids who say, wait, there was a quiz today? I didn't know that. So you look at all of those different pieces, and for me, it leads to the point of going to school. The point of going to school is having the opportunity to develop skills. And yes, some of those skills are really curriculum-based skills. Phonemes, how do you read? How do you decipher a word? How do you put together sentences? Writing, how do you study writing? How do you create a rhetorical paragraph? How do you create multiple paragraphs that approach in various different rhetorical methods so that you can defend your thesis or explore your thesis? All of those pieces. Those for me are all curriculum. But almost everything else that happens in school is an opportunity to practice skills, and most notably, executive function skills. When you go to school, and I'm sure that you may have had a student ask you, hey, am I going to need this algebra later in life? And the answer is no and yes. No, you're not necessarily going to have to factor a trinomial when you are 35 years old, but you will need cognitive flexibility. You will need the ability to look at something and say, what order should I do that in? Or is there multiple ways of approaching that? Or how will I know that I have the end result? How do I plug the answer back in to make sure that I made the right choice? So you do need that cognitive flexibility all the time. And that's where I look at school and I say, school gives me these opportunities. So the first set of opportunities that I see school offering are these executive function opportunities. So you see all of them in front of you. Executive function has become the buzzwords of the last 10, 15 years. Oh, your child struggles with executive functions. I love hearing that because obviously I'm an executive functions coach and I have training in helping students with their executive functions, but I prefer the specificity around it because then it gives me a chance to look at school and say, okay, what is my child being exposed to in mayhem when there's a slew of final projects? Well, my child is being exposed to some curriculum. We'll talk about that in a moment. But my child is also being exposed to time management. My child is being exposed to planning and processing. My child is being exposed to task initiation or prioritization or breaking assignments down into smaller components. My child's being exposed to attention and focus. So every one of these is an executive function, and every one of these is something that school helps children practice. Different at every grade level, obviously, but every one of these becomes an opportunity. And so back to the main idea, the main goal, if the conversation becomes, oh yeah, I really didn't do so well on this math final exam, that non-judgmental conversation after that could include a conversation around, how did you prepare? How did you take the test? Did you jump around on the test or did you go question by question by question? Did you run out of steam? Did you run out of attention and focus? Did you not prioritize the final three questions, which were each worth 20 points, and all the other questions that were multiple choice and only worth one? Did you? So as soon as you change and shift the idea of why did that final exam exist in the first place? What is the final exam testing? Yeah, it's testing math. I got it. But it's also testing every one of these executive function opportunities. And so looking for those patterns and being able to have that discussion can completely change the conversation. Oh, you just struggled with prioritization on the test. Good to know. Now let's practice. How do you prioritize? How do you look at a test and that's so non-judgmental rather than, well, you didn't study at all, or you're terrible at math, or so all of a sudden you have the opportunity to have a conversation and then scaffold from there. I'm taking off my executive function hat for a second and I'm putting on the curriculum hat. So school, and especially the mayhem that school offers, and it does. Mayhem is around projects, final projects, presentations, graduation, prom, final social events, final exams. All of these are curriculum opportunities. So why would a teacher offer a DBQ, for example? A lot of teachers have a final exam that is a DBQ, which will give you 10 documents, and you've got to read all of those documents and then support a writing prompt with those documents. Well, we talked about the executive functions that go into that, but here's an opportunity for students to understand more about their reading comprehension. How do you read a paragraph and take notes on that? When was it written? Who wrote it? Who's the audience? Who's the intended audience? What is the bias of the article? Can I put all of that together quickly? Now go on to the next article and the next article. Now look at the analysis of all of those and see if I can put those together in a... So you see my point, how you've got a group of executive functions, but now you have a group of curriculum opportunities. And so back to the idea of, how'd you do on your math final exam? Oh, well, I did really well on all of the problems that used the formulas, but as soon as we had word problems, I got all of those wrong. That's great news because now you can use that information and you can say, great, let's practice word problems. Oh, here's where your challenge is. Your challenge is in the reading comprehension of using verbal language or written language to decipher which one of the formulas to use. That's great news because now you can work with that and you can build a plan in place. So again, back to the idea of why is there so much for school at the end of school? There are so many studies out there one as recent as 2024, where educational psychologists are able to identify that these end of year tests, the summative tests, summing up everything that you've done over the course of the year, absolutely help improve. And you can read some of the items that I've put over here. Memory recall, long-term knowledge retention, preparation for college, higher education, critical thinking skills, stress coping skills, time management skills. So look at both of those. Some of those are curriculum-based, memory recall or not, sorry, knowledge retention. Some of those are executive function based, memory recall, time management. And some of those are psychologically based, stress coping. So the point of that summative assessment, why does school in May and June put all of this pressure on? It's by design. It is, we've spent all of this time building up for the big show. We've done rehearsal, we've done dress rehearsal, and now here we are, it's big show time. And all of the evidence definitely shows that big show time today leads to greater success down the road. That doesn't happen for my kid. My kid gets anxious and overwhelmed. My kid avoids studying. I can, at home, put everything together on a calendar and every night, and it doesn't work out. And that is my job. That is what I do with my students, with the families with whom I work. And so I have tremendous experience with that, and I have tremendous empathy with that. The only way around it, the only way around it is to pick it up and put it on the table and say, let's talk about it. Let's look at what worked and what didn't work. And let's figure out how to practice it so that you get better at it. First step is just acknowledging it, reframing it as an opportunity. I got a really crummy grade on my history final paper. Okay, can we look at it? Can we identify where the teacher is giving you feedback? Can we do something with it so that that conversation can lead to either some summer practice, some practice and scaffolding for next year, some self-awareness? Can we remove that stigma of, oh, I tried and I didn't do as well as I wanted, so I guess I'm a failure, and reframe that as I tried and I didn't do as well as I wanted to do. Let's talk about what I'm going to do next time. Let's figure out what I need to practice or what experience I need for next time so that I'm trying differently. I'm preparing differently. I'm engaging differently. And let's see if my outcome can be somewhat different than what I had before. Because at the end of the day, that, for me, is why you go to school. You go to school for all of these opportunities. And that's my moment where I want to step back for a couple of seconds. The pause and reflect in some ways mimics what it is that I ask some of my parents to do, that I try to do, that I try and engage with students to do. Pause and reflect on, does this resonate for you? If it doesn't, how can you engage in this material so that it might resonate for you? Taking a moment at the end of the school year and looking at everything that went well, pinning that up on the refrigerator, and then taking a moment to look at what perhaps hasn't gone as well as we wanted it to, and really reflecting on that process. What were your grades, semester over semester over semester? What are the teacher progress notes? Or what did you learn at the parent-teacher conference? Can we take all of that and put that on the table and reflect without it being something that is unbelievably judgmental? There's nothing wrong with you if you run out of steam on a final exam. There's nothing wrong with you if your project, your final project, you pick the wrong DBQ article. But if it's an opportunity for you to now revisit so that the next time you pick a different DBQ article or the right one or one that supports your claim and statement, there you go. Pretty amazing. So for me, from a learning perspective, what I would do, what I would guide, and I do it in my own household and I guide other people to do it, is after the discussion, maybe figure out what can we do as a family, if that's appropriate for you and your family. Like, can we over the summer all read the same book and have a family conversation around it? Or can we over the summer all go see the same movie? Or even can we go out to our favorite restaurant and come home and write a review, a restaurant review, like an internal Yelp review? Or if you can be vulnerable enough, can, somebody in the family cook dinner and accept a Yelp review from your kids or from your spouse or what have you? But each of those helps in some way to create the opportunity to first and foremost have like these non-judgmental conversations, but secondly, to be able to reflect on, all right, if you didn't think that my meal was terrible, support that. Well, it doesn't taste good. Okay, but more specific. What part of it doesn't taste good? Well, I don't like the sauce that you put on it. Okay, what flavor of the sauce do you not like? So all of a sudden, you're guiding a conversation that A, lets you be the model for being on the receiving end of feedback, non-judgmental feedback. And B, you're now working as a family to write a 5-paragraph essay. Wow, that could be an interesting thing to do. So that ultimately, and we'll revisit, I will speak again and revisit in a few moments. But for me, the goal is to step back during and after mayhem and really celebrate the successes and very comfortably talk about what were the challenges and let those challenges stimulate what might be done over the summer, what might be done next school year, and put it somewhere where there will be a constant reminder, because that is the goal of going to school and living through mayhem year over year over year. And with that, you're probably tired of hearing my voice, which is great because we are moving on for Melanie's voice.
Well, thank you very much, David. And I loved hearing your voice, and I loved hearing all the great ways that you positively reframed all the opportunities that can be found in the chaos of mayhem. You've already highlighted some of the ways that you can use this from an emotional perspective to kind of nurture your relationship with your child. Um, I'd like to talk more about ways that you can safeguard your child's mental health during mayhem and beyond. David highlighted a lot of the stresses that happened at the end of the school year, like exams and final projects, as well as your social events and academic events. And those can create a lot of pressure on students, parents, teachers, and it can really feel overwhelming for everybody and just too much. What makes it even worse? Excessively high standards of performance. And that's what we started out talking about with some of our statistics that we showed you. For that would be getting academically, having the expectation that a student needs to get all A's, that needs to earn fives on AP exams, or needs to excel at a sport to get recruited into a top college. And these are things that we hear every day in the community that we live in. Even if it's as a parent, you try to convey to your children that you don't have these types of expectations for them, young people do pick it up from their peers and the community at large. And the standards, can be excessively high, become internalized from the messages that they're hearing. So David and I started this presentation showing some compelling research that excessive pressure to excel sets children up for mental and physical health problems, including feeling overwhelmed and exhausted with high levels of anxiety and depression. So excessive focus on the outcome or performance paradoxically sets your child up to fail at college and even later. So let me talk In the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about achievement culture because that's really one of the things that's a big problem. So achievement culture is a huge problem. It's characterized by an environment of unrelenting pressure to excel. It's a culture in which success and self-worth are primarily measured by accomplishments, accolades, and external validation. That means grades, awards, could mean Insta followers, it could mean TikTok-led unrealistic standards of appearance. And these unrealistic expectations lead to mental health challenges. Achievement in this kind of culture is based on a narrow definition of what it means to be successful as an adult, often to go to a top college and achieve a certain lifestyle. Unfortunately, achievement culture is prominent in affluent suburban communities, such as those found in Fairfield County. And it really places youth at risk for clinically high levels of anxiety, depression, and substance use. It's even greater, it places our children at even greater risk than inner city youth, which might come as a big surprise. The negative impact of achievement culture is discussed in Jennifer Wallace's excellent book, Never Enough, that some of you may have heard of. And I've borrowed some of the concepts that she talks about in her book for this presentation. And mayhem is a time that makes young people particularly at risk. So why all the pressure? It comes from a good place. In the past 30 years, a good place from a parent perspective. What's happened in the past 30 years, the world has grown more competitive and uncertain. And parents grasp onto the belief that childhood success, such as grades, trophies, top colleges, yields a path to a secure, happy adult life. However, that's a fallacy, as we showed you with some of our research. Focusing on the outcome of success places your child at high risk for negative mental and physical health. One of our most lauded psychologists, Erik Erikson, wrote about human development that the critical task of adolescence is gaining a sense of personal identity. It's not getting straight A's. So human development is undermined when the adolescent feels a need to be high achieving or perfect to be loved. And unfortunately, perfectionism has really increased in the past few decades. It's increased by about 33%. That's been shown in large-scale studies, and it's fueled by unrealistic expectations. But why is perfectionism bad? I hear my clients and their parents say, well, perfectionism really drives you to do well and to achieve. But perfectionism is a thinking style that's focused on the outcome. Did I get an A? Did I get lots of likes? Did I get into Harvard? Rather than the process of learning and developing a sense of oneself separate from external validation. And perfectionism is an unhealthy thinking style that underlies thinking in anxiety and depression. So just to bring it into a little bit of a real world context, this is a quote from a Staples High School student. If you're not aware, Staples is the high school in Westport, Connecticut, which is arguably rated as the top high school in all of Connecticut. It's highly competitive and it's one of the best high schools in the nation. It's a public high school. So this is a quote. As someone who comes from a family that is extremely supportive of me and someone who sees all of this craziness about grades, I know how it affects kids. My friends are all freaking out about grades, APs, and academic pressures. Yes, I do well in all of my high-level classes, and I do feel some stress, but it just really upsets me to see the competition everyone creates. So even if kids are doing well, they're suffering. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what is self-worth versus achievement. What's the difference between developing a true sense of self-worth and sense of self, which is what Erikson said is a key developmental stage in adolescence, versus value that's based on achievement and external validation? The sense of self-worth that somebody can carry through their whole life is based on feeling intrinsically valued versus relying on external outcomes for achievement. what does external validation look like? It looks like I will be worthy if I get straight A's, if I lose 10 pounds, if I get 10,000 K of followers. It produces fleeting happiness, always chasing the next goal. It's the never enough feeling that relies on others' opinions to feel good. On the other hand, feeling intrinsically valued does not depend on external outcomes, and it's something you can take throughout your whole life. The concept of mattering was discussed by Rosenberg in 1981, and what it means is feeling seen, cared for, and understood. Mattering creates resiliency in children, including high self-esteem and low depression. It's a process of developing strong, meaningful connections and knowing that you are not alone. It's not getting straight A's. It's not getting into Harvard. It's not getting into, a top crew team. It's very closely aligned with the concept of Carl Rogers, which many people, it's been very popularized, is of unconditional positive regard, which produces strong, resilient adults and children as well, versus creating conditions of worth where someone feels like they need that external validation to be worthy. So I've talked a lot about kind of the pressures and what toll this has taken on our youth. I'd like to now go into, how do we reduce the pressure? How do we make kids more resilient? So I'm going to give some suggestions about how to safeguard self-worth and mental health during mayhem and even beyond. And David has said some of these. He's done a beautiful job intertwining this in some of his learning with, for example, non-judgmental supportive communication to reduce some of the pressure that kids feel. So the first one is to lead with, what did you have for lunch? When you pick your child up from school, it's such a temptation to say, and I felt this myself, how did you do on that big science test that you were so worried about? Did you do okay? Did you, do you feel like it went okay? But that really makes kids feel like that's the most important part of them, and that condition creates this kind of conditions of worth situation. So lead with, what did you have for lunch? How are you feeling today? How can I help? That sounds really hard. Just a lot of validating statements, not judging their performance. And supporting them by saying, you will make it through this. How can I help? As I said before, don't focus on the outcome and grades. Instead, focus on the learning process. David just gave some great examples of how to focus on the learning process, not on the outcomes. And even if you praise, praise kids like, that was so great, you got an A on that science test, it can feel like conditions of worth. They interpret that as valuing the outcome rather than valuing who they are as a person. Praise their work ethic, praise their learning, praise all those things that David put up on the slide that maybe they did really well. Maybe they didn't get an A, but maybe they did plan for their work really well. Maybe they did learn to be a little more flexible in their thinking. Stop making comparisons, if you do it, hopefully not, to other kids or other people. And even if they're positive comparisons, like, oh, that, you did so much better than your friends on that test, that still really kind of gives the message of conditions of worth. Other ways to reduce the pressure that is related to non-judgmental supportive communication is just the idea of just delighting in your child's ordinary, authentic self, who they are. Delight in their imperfections, delight in who they are. That sends the message that I love you no matter what. If you don't get an A, I love you. And that's really what's going to propel your child into being resilient and having a happy, successful life. Teach and model empathy. This is a big, big issue in our society. A large-scale study, I keep talking about these large-scale studies, but done by the University of Michigan with 14,000 young adults, found that in the last 30 years, empathy as a trait is 40% lower. people are not as empathetic on average overall as they used to be. So this is really something that you can give your child to try to teach empathy, to try to model empathy is something really important. What else can you do to reduce the pressure? Be a balance keeper. You can just do simple things like pragmatically helping kids schedule their study and homework time, to David's point about executive nurture, kind of developing executive functioning skills. Um, Create reasonable study blocks with breaks. Make sure your kids are taking breaks every 20 to 30 minutes. Reduce distractions during studying. That's a really tough one. I will let you work on that more on your own, but the goal would be closing tabs while working, not having phones, setting rules about while doing homework. It's not an easy one, but it's one to kind of aspire to. Um, but for teens, try to have bedtime before midnight. I can't tell you how many times I hear from kids they're staying up till 3 in the morning and studying or on Discord or something with friends. Try to get them to sleep before midnight. Um, and the goal of 8 to 10 hours per night is the AMA recommended amount of sleep for teens. Okay. Again, ways to be a balance keeper. PDF, prioritize playtime, downtime, and family time every day. Even during Mayhem, there should be some time to relax, some time to connect with your family. Um, you can also, the idea of Wallace talks about this in Never Enough, prioritizing non-optimal family activities. It's just family playtime, just enjoyment time, not focused on any kind of achievement. It could be game nights, it could be picnic at the beach, it could be going to a Broadway show altogether. Anything that your family would just like truly enjoy doing with no kind of goal in mind other than enjoyment. Family meals. I specialize in eating disorders, and family meals are a huge protective factor for adolescents in so many ways. I don't even have time to go into it. Try to set a family meal, try to set a family dinner, even if it's for a half an hour, every day, or at least a few times a week. Teach kids that friends and family are more important than some of these achievement goals. And the irony is, or the paradox, that is having a balanced approach actually improves achievement. Okay, other ways to reduce the pressure. David has been highlighting this in his part of the presentation. Be a role model. Avoid something called intensive parenting. Intensive parenting is putting the child's needs in front of the family. I've been so guilty of this. Have prioritized my family's needs about myself, but it doesn't really set things up to go well for anybody. It sets up unrealistic expectations for all people, for parents and children. And it's better to strive to be a good enough parent, not a perfect parent. A big one is telling failure stories. If your kid did poorly on a test, say, oh my gosh, I might have gone to this good university, but I failed this class and I did so poorly on on my science test. And you can also use that as an opportunity to, talk about, as David said, kind of pause and reflect on how you might, we all have failures and how we kind of learn from them and how we grow from them. Um, Walk the line between supporting your children and respecting autonomy. Try not to be a helicopter parent. There's lots of different cliches that we use now, but it's important for kids to learn some autonomy while you're still supporting them. Recognize your own stresses and worries. Share them with your friends. A lot of times we try to put up this perfect image of our family and our children, but it's important to be vulnerable. And I think David mentioned this, and it shows a model for your children for being vulnerable and seeking help when things are hard. Take stock in your own anxieties and mental health challenges. Engage in self-care, including therapy. Take time out to do this. It's rather than engaging in, the idea that putting your child's needs always first. And you're that way, by doing some of these things, you're really teaching and modeling a balanced lifestyle that will help your child be resilient and healthy in long-term ways. Okay. So I'm going to pause and reflect as David did. So over the summer, use this time to reflect on what went well over the year and what could be improved. Is your child's anxiety escalating? Is your own? What do you anticipate for next year? Make a plan for the summer and the next school year. It could be engaging in learning services, getting tutoring or therapy, and it could be also just making more time for a family dinner, for PDFs, non-optional PDFs, playtime, downtime, family time, or just doing a fun activity that your child loves with no achievement value.
So I think we're at that time to think about how do you put it all together. So the facts, 20% of all first year college students don't make it. And when you peel back the first layer of the onion, the don't make it is all skill driven. They are not able to maintain the academic rigor and independence that's being asked of them. And that is the highest percentage reason for that challenge. If you look at right now, it is May into June. All of the teachers who are out there are at their end. They are trying to cram in some curriculum. They are going to the professional development meetings. They are going to placement meetings for next year. They are having end of school year PPT meetings. They are also at their end. So they are not going to be available to really support and bolster the skills, executive function skills and curriculum skills that your students been exposed to over the year. So that means it's on us. And so as parents, as adults, as guardians of the children, it is on us to create that modeling. It is on us to help guide them, as Melanie said a moment ago, in how are you preparing for that? Or do you remember last year what happened? Or even after it's all over, and let's call it the crisis. Um, Okay, that wasn't successful. Not the end of the world. We've all done poorly on tests. When we're ready, let's step back and take a look at it. Was it the curriculum that you didn't know? Did you not study the right material? Or was it how you took the test? Let's let this be a learning opportunity and build from there. So every time you reframe all of this, it gives you and your family, you and your child, an opportunity to grow. Not an opportunity to feel bad, but an opportunity to say, all right, yeah, I'm still not great at taking these kind of timed writing assessments. Maybe we need some practice over the summer. Maybe as a family, we can do them together. Maybe there's an opportunity to put all of this together. So I wanted to revisit the call to action that we put at the very beginning. Remember, we started with a crisis, just like you're going to the movies, you're going to see the new Marvel movie, and the first thing that happens is that the planet explodes. And now we're going to revisit how did we get there and what can we do about it? So great, we know the crisis. Focusing on the process and not the outcome. How did you put all of it together? What did you do? And it doesn't have to just be, I keep talking about the poor grade on the math test. What if, what'd you have for lunch today? Oh, it was that yucky pizza again. Oh, all right, well, whatever. How'd you do on the DBQ test? Oh, I did the best in the class. I got 100. Wow. How did you do that? How did you take that test? How did you study for that? So celebrating not just the achievement, but the process for getting there. That brings this incredible conversation about executive functions and about skills and about the development of all of those with the curriculum that was put in front of you. Lastly, finding, if you can, and this is so hard, but finding the ability to be the role model, to be the person who puts his phone away in front of because I need to focus on what I'm doing right now, or puts puts that vulnerability. I used a silly example of, hey, I want everybody to give me a Yelp review on dinner tonight, or I want everybody to give me a what have you. But being able to be that role model, to share your own challenges, and it can be serious and it doesn't have to be serious. I'm learning how to play pickleball right now. At the very moment, I'm terrible, but I can tell you what I'm doing to practice to become a more adept player and how I'm going about doing that and how much time it's taking me to do that and what happens when I watch YouTube videos on how to play pickleball. And all of a sudden, I'm sharing how do you develop skills with the students in my life. And I'm making myself vulnerable and letting them say, "Oh, I saw a good YouTube video," or "My aunt plays, you should talk to her," and it makes us very human to each other in a non-judgmental way. So
So, David,
quickly,
if I want to make sure, thank you so much. I just want to make sure that we have some time for questions.
yep, I do as well. Let's go. That's what I was just
Because,
wrapping up to say. Here was our
okay.
agenda. Just revisiting our agenda. I think we hit everything that was on our agenda. And so, boom, there we are. Thank you, Melanie. We are at questions, comments, feedback. If anyone has a question or if there were questions put into the Q&A, please feed them to us or unmute yourself and freely speak.
I'm not, so we do have a question in the Q&A, which is, a pretty sizable question, which is why I apologize for cutting you off a little bit, but I
It's all good.
have a very thoughtful and important question that I think it might take us a little time to kind of answer and talk about. Yeah, you can't, and also the setup with the webinar is such that people cannot unmute themselves. So we have to handle the answers, kind of the questions in the Q&A. So
Got it.
I will read and please, thank you for this question, whoever proposed it, and feel free to keep, responding in the Q&A. So I'll read the question. The question is, what do you recommend parents can do to reduce stress on children from the changes that have resulted in several districts from all the federal cuts? Teachers, support staff positions are being eliminated, school closings, etc. Question mark. A very big question. We are in a brave new world where we have not experienced this, I believe, where we're seeing so many cuts in education. It puts us in a whole new world of how to respond to these things. So far, I've noticed a shift in tone in some of the PPT meetings um, I've sat in on. But I'm curious if this person who had this question can share more specifics about maybe their situation, or David, whether you have some thoughts.
My thoughts gravitate back to something that I said earlier, and similar to you, I have actually been in PPT meetings where there is a somewhat there's a gravitas in PPT meetings that I've gone to in this second half of the academic year. So January until as recently as last week. And in the meetings, the attention is what I'm noticing is that so much more is being put on the adults, on the parents, on the caregivers, to be able to say, it's up to you to solve this because of so many of these cuts. And more to the point earlier, the more that a caregiver or a parent or a guardian can really help guide these discussions into what is the process that you engage in order to work with these skills. The more that you can do that, it really helps bring specificity of language because as something as small as, and this is a relatively small example directly from a PPT, I work with a student who was receiving lots and lots of in-school and out-of-school supports. One of the major in-school supports is no longer in existence, and they are not able to go to a learning resource math person 4 times a week. Position is closed, not being reopened. And so I was able to voice for the student and the group a specificity. This student needs example problems in order to demonstrate mastery on the material. And everyone's shoulders came down because that's something that can be put into an IEP, that the student is able to bring in 5 sample problems or formulas and take the test in the resource room so that there's no embarrassment for the student or the other students don't see the accommodation. And all of a sudden the student has the support that he needs. And so there is a creativity that is going to go into what kind of support students receive that is very skill driven and has to become very, very specific. And you're going to see teachers bringing that to the table. One of the things that I see right now in almost every high school class is that before students go into class time to essay, they are putting together an outline as a homework assignment that they've got to submit to the teacher, and then they're allowed to bring that outline with them to the test. Things like that are a huge accommodation, but it takes such burden off of the student and off of the teacher, and it's not creating a scaffolding that doesn't mimic real life. When I have to write something that is really complicated, I will put together an outline and often show it to somebody else and get feedback on it before I put together the final product. And so those are the kinds of items that I'm experiencing right now, where there's a creativity and a specificity that's going into the requested accommodations so that guardians can do it at home or schools are able to easily provide it. I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but that was my thought.
I think that that was such a great response, David. And I've also seen the same thing where if you're having that specificity about what specific skills you want to build, the schools are much more open to that. And it takes less, if the resources in terms of positions are being cut, they can find more creative ways, because I do think the school's intent is to really help and serve students, even if the resources are being cut, that they can find more creative ways to do those specific kind of learning skills to build those with the resources that they have. And maybe that's overly optimistic, but I have seen schools also, try their best to accommodate even if the resources are cut. Um, I think the question also, is asking about like reducing stress on children, and just more generally, I think that if parents can advocate, really strongly for their children and find means to do that, at the same time, protect your children from the stress of that kind of, there are a lot of things that, parents, that it's important to kind of insulate the children from some of that stress. If you're feeling anxious and worried about it, and uh, parents are talking about it a lot in the household and frustrated with it, I think it's important to kind of separate out what is appropriate for kids to hear. And, they have a lot of stresses already, to parents to advocate, but also to think carefully about what part of that you want to share with your children.
And I think with that, we are out of time. So I wanted to, for those who are still viewing, first of all, this you can see there is the works cited, so obviously you'll get this. Um, and you will receive a link to this video of what we put together today, as well as all of the slides that we had. And thank you very, very much for attending the final parent discussion for this academic year. We will see you next year with a monthly brand new slew of parent discussions. So thank you all very much.